Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. I haven't said that in a while. Monday through Friday, posting new episodes, and I have two great guests joining me today. Christian Finnegan for Finnegan Fridays, and Ophira Eisenberg is back for what looks like could be a regular weekly appearance. And so maybe I get Christian, Mara, and Ophira every week. People seem to really like them, and I certainly love talking to them. And who else would you like to hear on a regular basis? You tell me. But it is Friday, so Christian joins us, Ophira joins us, and I've got you. What a week it's been. Thanks for letting me have the day off on, Wednesday? At the kind of a mental health day, and I felt better for it. I'm glad I did that. That's my big lesson to take away from the week. Had an awesome time hanging out last night with subscribers. There was over 50 of you there last night. We really had a good time. We had a little spirited debate about some political issues that I thought was super helpful to hear a wide variety of points of view, rational, thoughtful, intelligent people with a lot of experience thinking about these things. That many of you in the stand-up community, and so great to see so many of you. We do that every Thursday night. I host a virtual hangout, and that is always a lot of fun. Last night, no exception, but because I do that on Thursday nights, I think we did almost 2 hours. I only planned to do an hour last night. Yeah, the week before it was like 3 hours. It's always fun, but yeah, no news on Fridays, and I know I skipped it yesterday, but I do have my new equipment, and so the opening, I still haven't check the mic and set the mic up perfectly, but I don't think you're noticing too much of a difference, although you might notice a bit of a difference on today's interviews, but that's that. I've got a backup mixer now, and so I shouldn't be having too many technical problems moving forward. I mean, I'm always going to make mistakes, but that's your job to call them out. If you're not already a subscriber, go to standupwithpete.com right now. All right, Christian Finnegan and I had another awesome conversation, as always, but it got deep again with Ophira Eisenberg. We're kind of revisiting this theme each week about what it's like to be in the suck for a job loss, for an employment transition, or other as well. But Ophira and I really seem to click on that topic, and I just think she's so brilliant and intelligent, and she's going through something very similar to what I went through when her long-running, very popular show at NPR, where she's the host of Ask Me Another, just announced it got canceled. And she's a hilarious stand-up comedian, OphiraEisenberg.com, Ophira E on social media. You gotta follow her Instagram as well, at Ophira E, because she makes fun of what she calls toxic positivity, which I think is hilarious. So another great conversation with her, so let's get it started right now, shall we? Ophira Eisenberg, let's go.
Do we have questions? Are we doing trivia?
I don't have questions. I didn't prepare that. I
okay. No worries. I'm severely disappointed.
Going forward.
Really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm really so sorry.
So disappointed. And so is everybody else. I'm just going to say.
Oh, okay. You know what? It takes a little prep and time. And as I am having my own life implode, I did not find that time.
Well, don't worry about it. Let's talk about the implosion, because here on our regular segment, whenever we talk, we want to talk about losing your job, losing your gig, career transitions, tragedy of any sort, and we want to have a kind of any way we can fun with it. So I'm happy to talk about it, and I'm happy to have you, Ophira. You had your last episode of Ask Me Another aired this week. Help me understand what the timeline is, what happened.
Yeah, so that was recorded a few weeks ago. Basically, we were supposed to do 2 live episodes to be our final 2 episodes, but they got canceled because of Delta fears. So then there was some, shuffling of ideas of what we could do for the final episode. And I believe, I think I suggested this, that I was like, well, Jonathan Colton does have basically a nice recording studio in his apartment, because he is also a musician. And so he has a nice setup. And so I said, we're both vaccinated. If he's comfortable, Jonathan, can we at least be in the same room to do a show instead of, and he was into it. So we, for the second last episode, we had some special guests on, and, in that sense, we just did what we do with some of our favorite guests via Zoom. But for the very last episode, I went to his place and we got drunk while recording. And we had already gotten a lot of questions from our listeners and fans, and we answered them. So it was that, it's called Ask Me Another. So now it was you get to ask us the questions, but it was basically fans of the show asking us all kinds of questions about the show and the legacy and the history. And it was very fun. I don't think I've had that much to drink in so long, Pete. I think I'm still getting over it because we had shots. We used to start every show with shots. So we did shots of Maker's Mark. Actually, we had a different bourbon. And then we had martinis. I drank a few martinis and then we finished the recording and it was really hot too. It was still in the hot part of the summer. And of course, when you're recording, you turn off all your air conditioning and stuff like that for noise. So we were just hot and drunk. And then we stopped recording. We kept chattering because now you're all hopped up on gin. So we kept chattering. And then basically, I think and then we just had some beers. I don't know. It's been a long time since I drank that much, but I do remember that thing where you drink hard alcohol and you get to a point where you cannot drink more hard alcohol. Like you've reached your limit, but you still you don't want the night to end. So the responsible choice seems to move to beer.
I honestly don't know that I get to that point. If I drink hard alcohol and I start to feel too drunk, I'm out. It wasn't long after that I was like, okay, I got to walk home. And then as I walked home, I was like, I have 3 great ideas. And I think I still on my phone have like video of me walking down the street, like making sure I captured my great ideas. That's great. You're drunk and talking to your phone in the middle of the street in Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly. Walking home.
Well, did you guys, I'll link to that episode in today's show notes if people want to listen to it. I really want to listen to it. But did you in that episode with the drinking and the ending of it, did you compromise your credibility or your future?
I think if we did, it was thankfully, I don't have a hand in the edit. So that would have been edited out by the producers that work at NPR, which I greatly appreciate. Although, I'm not totally against of losing someone's credibility. I think that is a human flaw that we can all relate to.
You're saying that we shouldn't judge when someone compromises their credibility. We should forgive them and allow them to reestablish it and find redemption somehow.
I think there's levels of credibility, first of all, but I think, I think there are all moments where we may lose a little bit of our credibility. Because...
Well, let me throw one at you.
Okay.
So I'm a big deal TV host.
Yes.
And we're having we're just having some drinks, little celebrations, the 100th show. And we're all feeling we're good. And you're my executive producer.
Mm-hmm.
So you're running the show. That's the top job.
Yep.
And you come, you meet us. And you're with your husband too. He actually is like sitting right behind you. And you come in and I give you a hug. And I grab a handful of your ass also.
Right.
And your husband actually sees it.
Yeah.
What does that do to my credibility? And then you call me out on it that night in an email, and I apologize that night. Where does that leave us? Where does it leave my credibility?
Okay, well, I don't know. I don't even put that in a class of credibility. I would just be like, you don't do that. That would be like minor sexual assault or major sexual assault on who you talk to. I'm going to say minor just because I have some clearly institutionalized misogyny that I work through from years of growing up in different eras.
You have a spectrum for which to judge. Sadly.
That's right. But no, you can't do that. You can't do that.
So, that story is ripped right from the headlines this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's and that's a
Chris Cuomo.
Right. That's a huge. You just can't do that.
Well, I think it's
power. That is, yeah.
I don't know how the law. I don't know how the law works, but if you and I just met in a bar and I did that, that's sexual assault. But if we worked together in the way described, they did, and I did that, it would be assault, and then there would be a corporate.
That's right.
Infraction of harassment and grounds for firing. One would think. So it's like not only is it a crime for anybody, it's also now you've done that to somebody that you work with. And nowadays, if you do that to somebody you didn't work with and your work finds out, then they have a good reason to fire you because they don't want people feeling unsafe.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So,
okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if my husband's there or not. I will say that. It doesn't even matter if my husband's there or not.
I just want...
I like that. That was a red herring thrown in that I was like, how does this factor into the mystery? But...
yeah, it's so weird, right? I mean, that your husband, how often do you witness your spouse, if ever? Well, maybe you do, but usually I feel like harassment and that kind of is like usually best done privately. Not with other people around to see it.
Just totally
much less your
It.
spouse.
To just take that in and be like, here we are, here we go. So I guess I'll just count down to someone talking about this on the news. I'll just count down.
Yeah. So what do you think when we were talking about credibility? Like, what is compromise? What I was thinking when I asked the question is like, did you get so drunk that you said something that somehow, like about the bosses? That would be like, no one wants to work with someone who's going to like be really critical of the bosses. Yes. It's hard to get a job and that might compromise your credibility. I mean, I have respect for people who do it, but you are compromising yourself. So.
Absolutely. No, it's so funny that, and of course I have my own personal views on that, but in the context of doing the show, I honestly, it didn't even come up. It didn't even occur for me to talk about anything, even pointing towards managers or the organization, who, because it's like that thing where, when you tell a personal story about yourself and some people will say, well, are you worried about the other people in the personal story about you like feeling offended or raw? And I will say, well, no, because this story is about me and I'm telling it because it's for me to expose my flaws and what I'm going through. I can't really talk to their journey or whatever. This is about my thing.
Right.
So you could just be like, well, that tunnel vision of complete self-absorption really helps you out when it comes to credibility.
Well, I mean, no, I think what you're saying is that like I'm giving you my point of view on the way I saw things and how it affected me. And if you want theirs, talk to them. But I can't really present their point of view. And I could say the same thing about what happened to me at SiriusXM. I mean, for sure. And I tried to handle that with as much grace because, the other thing about these jobs there are corporate jobs. I think people can relate to this. There's a corporate job where you're let go, you're laid off, you're fired, you're whatever it is, you're terminated. You're not, in my case, I guess I call they didn't renew my contract after 15 years and 5 contracts, but that's also being let go.
Right.
I suppose it could be being fired, but usually think that's something that happens in the middle of a contract or something for some kind of cause. And there wasn't really that. So I think that it's media, it's corporate, whatever it is. And like, you can't take it too personal, except you can, because the people that you work with could have done this differently, could have done that differently. But it's not like you worked at the hardware store for your friend's dad and your families were always there for each other and he fired you. Like that's personal.
True. And I would love to hear from any of your listeners, if anyone has had a situation where they were let go, that they thought it was handled beautifully. I'm going to make it that poetic, where they thought it was handled beautifully, because I think the way it was handled for me was very middle of the road. And in my contract, it was basically not renewing my contract because my contract is about to be up. So that's how it was put together. But I hear other people in corporate America who, basically they find out while someone that they don't know is putting their stuff in boxes and they are walked to an elevator. And it's not like they did anything wrong. It's not like there's any legal aspect. They just are being fired. And that to me sounds like it would mentally take a lot of like a big toll on you. So I would love to know if, because it should be learned, especially within the place that we are right now, where everyone is kind of collectively traumatized. And there's a lot of people losing jobs. There's a lot of people leaving jobs. Every company is buying up other companies. So that means there's going to be redundancy and layoffs. I would like to know if anyone goes, you know what, when it happened to me, I actually thought it was done well. Because I don't know what that looks like.
Are you allowing are you allowing for the possibility that it can be done appropriately and
well, I'm wondering. I mean, here's the question, Pete. I mean, I've been in a bazillion relationships. I don't know how many relationships you've been in.
One.
Just one?
Yeah, I never had a really serious girlfriend before I met my wife when I was 25. I dated a lot of girls.
Yeah.
I was in relationships with them, but they were never serious. I never lived with anyone.
Okay.
It was never, yeah. So go ahead.
But when you went out with someone or dated someone for a little while and then decided it was not right for you.
That happened a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you do?
I ghosted them. No, I always told them. One woman I broke up with because I was 20 and she was 35. I mean, we were only seeing each other a little bit, but I was like, yeah, this lady's a little bit, whatever, too much or something. And I didn't want to be in a relationship with her.
Yeah.
And she thought I was way older than I was. I never lied. She just thought I was because I was wise beyond my years.
Yeah. And when you're 20, that's a compliment. Now you would be like, what?
No, I always thought that was awesome. I always dated older women because of that, I think.
Yeah.
And I just showed her my ID. And that's
hilarious. And
but I know I don't have, I think, I don't know. It's a long time, Ophira, but I'm pretty sure I was pretty clear and honest as I could be about it. I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. Like, I just, whatever it is about you or something I don't like. I don't know.
No,
you wrote a book about this.
I mean, I did it in stupid ways that were not particularly sympathetic or even empathetic towards the other person, mostly driven by fear. Like, I didn't want to hurt the other person. So therefore you make stupid mistakes because you are, kind of immature. And it's hard. It is hard to be the person that just looks someone in the eye and says, here's the truth and it's going to burn now, but this is the best way. I avoided them. I basically ghosted people. But it was, it was in places that I would still run into them. So that ghosting just meant sort of avoiding them. And then eventually we had to deal with it.
I felt like I was being ghosted in my final year at Sirius.
Oh, really?
To get back to, like emails weren't being returned, calls weren't being returned. I wasn't getting certain benefits. Like, I was always invited. Like, I was a big deal there for the whole time up until the end. I mean, I'd created my own channel. And that gave me so much more credibility and I was doing great things. And then the final 2 years, it really just changed. Trump changed it a lot. For sure. But whatever. And so, like, I would always get the tickets, the Sirius XM concerts at the Apollo for Paul McCartney and Springsteen, and my favorite band of all time was U2, and it was the final year of my contract, and I didn't get U2 tickets, and then I went and I asked, I was like, what happened? And they're like, yeah, sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
You weren't on the list. I'm like, I'm on the air. What do you mean? Like, I don't get tickets. My ego is really.
I can't tell if this was a hesitation or if this was because the writing was already on the wall. And I know it took a little while for them to put all the pieces in place before they told the talent that the show was ending. But there was a bunch where I was like, all right, I think we're coming out of the pandemic. Are we, what's our live plan? What's our road plan? Right. What's our tour plan? And it was, I got a lot of like, we definitely, we got to put that together. It just seemed to be maybe pushed. And in a way, I just thought, this is just part of the inefficiency and hesitancy because it's very hard for everyone to decide what we're doing. And then it was like, or was it? I don't know.
Do you think the pandemic did a lot of damage or even killed the show? Because I was talking to Lori Kilmartin the other day, and she said the pandemic definitely, I think she said it killed Conan, the show. Yeah.
Well, basically, it did kill Ask Me Another because from a budget point of view, in some ways, I got a lot of listener reactions over the course of the last week, of course.
Yeah, I wanted to also ask you about that. So
yeah, and some people, I feel like it's very rare, but some people are like, yeah, it just didn't have the same energy that it did when it was live, which is totally true. But I would say overwhelmingly more of the other reaction, which is, you guys were there for me during the pandemic. And, dare I say, I like the in-studio version better because the in-studio version was more intimate. And I think that was the right marriage. It was the only marriage to the time because we couldn't do it live, but it was also the right marriage to the time because I think we all needed to feel a little closer to people and the media we wanted to consume. But part of the revenue model for that show was making money by selling tickets. And so we had almost
live shows,
2 years of not a dribble. And so the idea so we were heavily in the arrears, and the idea of then there was an investment, a considerable investment of money that had to be made to bring the show back live because staff had been reduced. Key staff had been reduced. Obviously, a live show is a much bigger production. And so there would need a considerable investment. And I'm pretty sure that all of these things on paper looked terrible, especially for a public media company that also is suffering because they lost, they're not depending on ad sales in the same way. They sell, as far as I know, especially with podcasts, they sell ads for a year as opposed to like block by block. So if someone pulled out early pandemic, they were not getting them back.
Right.
Yeah. So totally. I think if we were about to go on a Midwest tour that had obviously got canceled, we were about to do all these things. And that I felt like it was the moment, honestly, it was the moment of the show really realizing its place. And well, that's over.
So what I'm hearing.
Yes, what are you hearing?
I'm hearing that most of this, all of it pretty much, was completely out of your control and generated by, for sure, the lack of ticket sale revenue, but that you guys adapted and people really like what you did.
Yeah.
And so if I'm an NPR exec, I have this awesome built-in show and a great talent and huge following. I find a way to take these people who adapted well and transform, evolve into whatever's next, or somehow, try to find a way to keep them on the tab, because it's such a tough thing to create a brand like Ask Me Another, and, why let it go? But I'm not an executive.
Right.
So, but the bottom line, the most important point was it does seem like it was almost entirely out of your control, and you actually did is like really beautiful, creative things with what you guys did.
Yeah. I mean, as far as no one gave me any feedback during the course of it to say anything.
It's fun. I love that.
To say anything nice. Like this is not
what is it,
working.
That's so common. It happened to me so often. And I don't know if people were scared to give me feedback, if that was a tone I said or something, but I constantly asked for it. And my question is, my job is this, and your job is definitely to give feedback. So if you're not doing your job. It's very frustrating for me.
Yeah.
It's like, as a comic, believe me, I can take it.
Actually, can we talk about that for a second? Because that's so interesting that people thought that the perception was that you thought they were afraid to give you feedback.
I don't know.
People have said, I think, my self-perception is that I am like overly sensitive, honestly, and that I am non-threatening. I am the person that people ask to house sit, take care of their plants, their dogs. I mean, I'm the first person that someone's give directions. It is because I look approachable and
you're Canadian
and I'm non-threatening. But I have been told from people, you're a tough cookie, and I feel like it would be hard to give you feedback, and I don't get it. I'm like, what am I missing here?
Yeah, that's hard to, I think a lot of times people are afraid to give criticism and feedback because they're afraid. I mean, in relationships too. I mean, they're afraid to make you mad, to lose their status with you, to lose their credibility with you. But I tried to engender that as much as I possibly could. everywhere that I worked, where I worked with people, which is mainly at Sirius, but elsewhere as well. And always asked for ideas and criticism, to the point where I think I engendered an audience where if I misspoke on the air, if I stuttered, if I misspoke, I would get called out by my producer on the air. And, there are plenty of other things I can think of where they did give me notes, but it certainly was not enough. And then executives, that was just my producers. That was a whole different thing. They didn't say shit. Nothing.
Yeah,
I'm like, what do you do all day? Do you listen to the show? What do you do? Honestly, what is your job? Are you out there?
Getting all kinds of fanship or ad sales or
no, there's a department
promotion.
For that. Nope. There's departments for those things. Like, what if you're not listening to the show?
What are you doing?
At least a little bit. I know you got a lot of shows. Yeah. Then what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I guess not working. Yeah.
Avoiding, I don't know, a lot of avoidance of people.
So, and with feedback, I got to say, other than someone just going like, well, my feedback to you is, I don't like you, or I don't think you're funny. Like, I can't do much with that. I'll just have to be like, well, I'm not your thing. But anytime I've actually received what we'll call constructive criticism, even when it's a little harsh, like this doesn't make sense, or you have to work on this. Sure, it may sting in the moment. And sometimes I'm even like, in my head, I go, you're fucking wrong. Right? Maybe that is my gut reaction. You're fucking wrong. What do you know? And then, maybe 2 hours later, day later, I'll be like, yeah, okay.
I do that a lot too. I've done that both at work, professionally and personally. I've done a lot more with my wife or even my kids, like just coming back, like just slinking back with my tail between my legs, but like I was 100% wrong while I was screaming about how right I was. You were right. It's awful. But it's also, I think, a testament to your character for realizing it, hopefully admitting it to the person.
With writing, it's key because, I've only written one book. I should write another one. That's a failing and a flaw. But when I worked with a really good editor and a really good copywriter, which I happened to, and they would provide, like constructive criticism, and some of it was rough to take because also I was talking about my own life, and I would get all, as they say, my knickers in a knot. I would get all worked up about it, but God, it did make me a better writer. There was no two things about it. It was just hard. It was just hard too because you're like, oh, it's so much more work. I want to be lazy.
I'm too sensitive and too easily persuaded by notes. So listeners of this podcast have said any number of things. And I think the most recent one was, can you fade the opening music out earlier? It's just under you too long.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I was like, yes, done. And things like that. Like, I'm like, yeah, sure. But I could have two opposite opinions and take them both as well. I don't like the news dump segment intro or the segment itself or whatever. Okay. I love it. Fine. Like I listen to all of it and I get persuaded by all of it. I trust my instincts in the end. And that's I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just more for my listeners, right? Than it is for the situation. And hopefully people can relate to it. But
I think
it's the last thing you heard, the last critique you heard.
I also do the same thing too. If you get a lot of, and you can't do them all. Right. Like if people are like, oh, I liked this. That was, as I was just saying. So people were like, oh, I missed the live shows. And other people were like, oh, other people said, I prefer the other ones.
Right.
So if I were to go, I'll make a better show based on that. I just have to choose.
Right. So
what do I think?
What did people say? I mean, when my gig ended after 15 years doing it every day, I mean, the outpouring of love and respect and thoughtfulness is something I'll never experience again, I'm sure. And something it's almost painful to revisit. So I don't, because of everything around it. But if I did need an ego boost, I go back. I described it as watching my funeral.
Yes. So talk to me about this because just a crazy outpouring. And part of me goes, should I go through every single Twitter comment and Instagram comment and DM and reply to it? I feel like I should, but it's also extremely overwhelming. And emotionally, taxing because it really does hit me in my emotional core. And it does also feel like a little bit of a open sore because I've this ending has had so many endings. This has ended a few times. So I don't know what to do. And frankly, at this exact moment, I feel a little powerless because the first thing I want to do is just go, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Here's this.
Well, you should do that. Get everybody's email. Number one, don't worry, sign up for my email list to see what's next. But you should also take, I had a really hard time because I was so inundated with like amazing, kind, thoughtful messages that I couldn't reply to all of them and get anything else done. So every day I would try to reply to 10, and then they were everywhere. They were Twitter, they were Facebook, they were, email, text, everywhere. So I couldn't organize. And there are still a lot of people that wrote long, thoughtful things about what the show meant to them that I feel guilt that I didn't get back to. And just having this conversation is like, oh my God, I should probably go back and try to respond to more of those amazing, thoughtful things. But I couldn't. It was both good and bad. There was so much that I couldn't get to it, but because I couldn't get to it, I felt bad.
Yeah, and I just felt so incredibly overwhelmed by wanting to say. I also wanted to respond, in a way that was unique and personal, and talking back to them, which requires a certain amount of energy and brain power, instead of just like, thank you so much. I miss you.
Yeah, you want to be sincere. They poured their heart out. They gave you years of their listening and dedication and whatever, and you want to return that. But it's very hard. There's only one of you, and there's 7 of them.
That's right. And, because of the timing of it too, a lot of people, and this gets me because I am very empathetic as a fellow sufferer of pain and anguish. And it's been a hard year, and it's been so many hard years that when someone says, this is what, I can't believe I don't have this anymore because this is one of the bright spots for me in the pandemic, and I knew I could always depend on it. It just crushes me.
Yeah.
It crushes me.
Yep. And
I just go, why? Why is this happening? The one thing I was able to give you people, I can't do anything about.
Because it's corporate media, even though it's NPR, it might as well be. That's why, because that's it. Because
bottom line is bottom line.
Yeah, but also I think people said this to me, like things come to an end.
Yeah.
Even though they're beautiful for so many people, they come to an end, and it's what do you do with that? And now I'm coming up, as we're talking, I'm realizing I think my last day on air was October 8th or 9th, 19. Well, and so I'm coming up on 2 years of my last live show at Sirius, and 2 years of doing this podcast. Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So I guess the question or the point is, how does time between how does time change as you look back at relationships, at jobs, at careers? What does 2 years offer me? The answer to that. You just can't see it right now, I guess.
That's right. So I'll tell you the few helpful things. 2 helpful things and one other just observation, which I was like, this is good to know. I will never need to forget. I'm very good at not remembering dates. And I think it's part of a defense mechanism I have for some reason. Like even when someone goes, well, what day, month, or year did you start stand up? I didn't really keep track of it purposefully. And stuff like that, I don't keep track of purposefully. And I think it's a defense mechanism. I have some weird relationship with time and success and achievement that is probably worth talking about in a therapy setting. But I will never have to try to remember when the last episode of Ask Me Another aired, because thanks, life, it just happens to coincide with the day my mother died 2 years ago. So at least I'll always be able to put those 2 things together.
No. Did NPR kill your mom? Because that would make
honestly, I don't think she has a clue about NPR and ever did. I'm talking about her like she's still here because she lived in Canada. And although NPR is a national, as in U.S. national radio service, and she listened to the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company.
Did she know that you had a show?
She knew I had a show. She'd never been to a taping. I believed that she had heard it, but it was not really her thing.
That gets the point about that is that means this time of year will always be symbolic of those two things unless you are able to somehow change that. I don't know how that works. But.
Right. So just another challenge. Oh, really? Me again? So I have to change it. Got it. All right.
So another thing. So cool. I talked about this with Mara Quint on Monday, and she gave me great advice. And a couple of people both said the same thing, which was ask that to other people. I want to know what other people say to that question. And since you basically just set it up, how do you deal with 2 or 3 things at the same time? You got 2 gut punches and an uppercut to the jaw. You got career, relationship, kid, health, money. And then you got all the other, I call like news related, like the world stuff and existential threats or something. Like it's one thing to be able to deal with one and have a practice like, I'm going to put this in a box. But to have like a few different things, how does one function? How does one progress? How does one play a positive? How do you stay balanced with your kid, with your spouse, with your work if you've got a death in the family, an illness, an injury? So, my thing was this week, all my hardware went down. And while I was trying to find my replacement microphone stuff, I fell and rolled my ankle. Then I got a personal thing ongoing. And it's like, I'm not resilient. I'm not that resilient. I need to be more resilient. So that's the conversation. That's the question. Well, how do you deal with
Okay, so I'm going to attack a couple things you said here. Not attack. I'm just playfully talk about. I'm not attacking you at all. But, I do feel like, I can't tell if this is, honestly, I'm going to be weird here. I can't tell if this is an American thing. Because, with the whole life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, there's a very strong vibe, live, love, laugh, toxic positivity. It's all for the individual to control. And part of me is like, no, that is unrealistic, unfair, and unsustainable. You need people. You need community. It's not all on your shoulders. It shouldn't be on your shoulders. It is totally unfair for it to be on your shoulders. And humans are social beings who thrive with other people around them. So this idea that I feel like we are constantly banged over the head with, which is like, it all comes back to you and you got to pull yourself up. And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, doesn't work. Not how it should work. Gather. I don't know how to gather because I also have spent a life of being so solo in a weird way and pushing stuff away. And then you need this incredible team to help you. So that's one. I feel like it should be, no one should squarely have to deal with this.
Gather meaning other people.
Yeah.
Get a tribe.
Gather. Yep. I'm sure, I don't like this phrasing, but I've heard it. I'm just going to say in the way I don't like it, but it's been said to me many times. Like, all right, who are your cheerleaders? You gathered me, for example, because you, as I mentioned, you reached out to me immediately, and it's made a huge difference to me just not having to feel that isolated or alone, or it helped me take it all less personally. And I don't think the amount of time and effort and brain anguish it would take for me to get there on my own is a much longer road.
I'm glad to hear that. For sure. It's been a real burden. The time I spent with you, I could be working on my merch store.
It's true. It's true. I take up at least 45 minutes a week.
Merch store. Well, no, that's really, that's great advice. Look for the helpers, find people that, have a tribe. And I love what you said about it being kind of American. I think we could talk about that for a long time. It's a cultural thing. It's unrealistic, unfair, unsustainable, you said, to think that you're supposed to just get through it on your own without
put your head down and go.
Or pick your head up and go.
Or pick your head up and go.
Either way. It's the same.
And I think, of course, all that meditate, do stuff for yourself, take some time off all of that stuff is good because it is also just to stop the wheels from churning. But there is also just the pure fact, as you said, like, you got a family to respond to. You have you got to pay the bills. You got to respond. You can't just all of a sudden be a Renaissance person that is going to go off to a writer's retreat or a think tank or whatever, or a spa for 3 weeks and come back and get, now I'm ready. No, that's just not how most people's lives work.
The key to life to me has been, and a lot of my success, and something I tell my daughters about all the time, it's like my one lesson I'll repeat over and over is, if you want to find out how to be good at something, find someone that's good at it and make friends with them and learn from them and be their apprentice. If you are struggling with something, find someone who has struggled with a similar thing and listen to them and ask them questions and make friends with them and apprentice them and work with them. And so I think that's certainly why I called you immediately. I was like, her circumstances are so similar to mine. And I remember telling her about it when it had happened. And I remember her moving away from me for fear that it might be contagious. No, I remember her being there and listening and being super supportive and commiserating and being really thoughtful. And so I wanted to return that favor in a way. But the point being, like, if you're going through something like we're going through, you find other people. So job loss, relationship, health issue. Oh, you've been diagnosed with this disease. Find people and find a support group. And I guess that's what AA is.
Yeah. And I made a mistake because I had early stage, thank goodness, but I had breast cancer. And I made a mistake in that where I felt so messed up about it and messed up about how people would see me. And also I didn't want to take care of other people because you have to be very selective with your people, which is a cruel lesson in life because not everyone is there to be your supporter or your tribes person. A lot of people, like you said, are repelled by any of the stuff because it brings out the worst fears in them. So they want nothing to do with it. And that if you're not careful, you take that very personally, especially if you're in a vulnerable state. So I didn't want to tell anyone about my breast cancer, and I basically did not.
Wow.
I hid it and I put my head down and went through 2 surgeries and a month of radiation and just suffered.
Wait, nobody knew?
I mean, obviously a very close circle of mine knew, but I didn't talk about it but my close circle who knew, nobody else had experienced it. So they were just, this is a perfect time to cue an ambulance. Hi, New York. So it was just, they wanted to be there for me, but they didn't know. And I could hear their fears. I could also just hear their fears often. And what I should have done in hindsight is found other people who had been through it, who knew something about it and connected with them. And I did not do that. And it really did take a toll.
It's interesting to see how much has changed in our lifetimes alone on these issues of, we're talking about culture and you diagnosed, I think, a certain American archetype or ideology pretty well. And I do think it's changing for some people who are becoming more open-minded, understanding, sensitive, that we're all dealing with all kinds of shit. And it helps to share and talk because of what we're saying. You find people who have experienced it. So how did that end up for you? Like, did you ever, what happened?
I mean, basically I got to the other side of it and I'll just say what it is. I'm not particularly proud that this is how it went. And then I wrote about it and I ended up getting that published And then I told a personal story about it that ended up going out on the radio. And that is how most of my extended people found out.
You're not proud of that because you think you should have shared it with them privately before they found out.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think, and I didn't, I think I was far enough away to have a little bit of perspective because I'm against using entertainment for therapy as the creator. I think you should have some considerable distance from things to be able to have, as we are talking, we are creating a conversation. It's very different than me writing a piece right now about unemployment, which actually maybe is not a terrible idea. But
I would love to read that. But if not even a piece, like a journal entry too. Like I think a lot of times there are things you certainly can't say publicly and publish, but that you should say and talk about and document privately to once there is distance to go back and read. As I titled them in my journal, when I lost my job, every day I would write at the top of the page, the misery logs.
The misery log. Yeah. And just be able to get it out there. But the other side of toxic positivity is something a friend of mine said, and I really liked it. She said that, you don't have to be like, wake up every day and you're going to win this one, or any of that stuff that may not resonate and may not really feel like you can sort of say it, but you don't really feel it. She said, there's a way out of this. You just can't see what it is right now. Oh, but there is a way out of this. And I will tell you, with my cancer, as part of what it was for me to get over it, which ended up being a story I wrote, is because I am in search of a happy ending. I'm always in search of a happy ending of my own struggles. So I sit there and think about them and I go, what would be a happy ending to this? That's the story I want to tell about my life. I want the happy ending to this, but what is it? And I will struggle with that. But I was constantly thinking about what is the happy ending. And
I think it's funny talking to you because I find myself a little bit at a disadvantage with this kind of conversation with you, because I think your wisdom on it is far further. So I'm just trying to keep my head above water. But I mean, and at some points I feel like you're saying things that you know the answers to, and I'm going to say it anyway, which is you can't write that happy ending because of the point you made earlier, which is about finding the people. I call them a tribe. Yeah. It has to be written with others. So for me, going back to your point about you can't see it, you know that there's going to be something. You just can't see it. I'm not articulating that well, but you just said it. So Kelly Carlin told me,
yes,
I reached out to her at the darkest point, her and a couple others. I remember these conversations, and she used a metaphor, which I love. And she's like, you're on a small vessel in the middle of the sea, and it's dark and cloudy, and you can't see land anywhere. But I'm telling you, I'm on the land, and I see you, and you're going to come in. You're going to come in. You can't see it. And I just, even right now, thinking about that, just waterworks. And the land, honestly, like the metaphor for it all is the shed. Like this podcast, the podcast that I do every day that comes out of the shed, and the community that I built with it is far better than anything I ever imagined, and anything I could have had. I'm not making nearly as much money as I did at Sirius, but I'm way happier in almost every way.
And it's completely in your control, which I know that, like, obviously there's some things that are nice about having things not in your control because you are protected in a way from certain amount of things, but there's also just a devastating side of that, which is you're not in control. I mean, in some ways, I am looking for a project that I'm more in control of because, although if it failed, it would be a lot harder. But part of me goes, I would like to see if I can, win or lose. I would like to be there for all of it.
Well, I think you will. And if I didn't think that you would, I wouldn't be,
talking to me.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be. Let's be honest. Like, I'm invested in you because I think that you have a lot of potential to do whatever you want. But I also I think I want to have you here regularly because I think that you're of great value to me. And if you're of great value to me, then you can play that same role for yourself, for others. And so, yeah, it's it's kind of an endorsement of sorts. There's no doubt in my mind. It's a matter of like a lot of things that are, I think that you have to learn how to run that. I think as comedians, I know a lot of talented people, you do as well. And maybe you're one of these people. I don't know, that it's like you like to work with and for other people running the show and come in and do your thing.
Right.
But, and in a lot of ways, that's much less stressful. But, when you do it this way, there's a lot more responsibility. And it seemed like at 45, do I have to run the show?
Yeah.
But and as people said this, once I got through all the hard shit and learned the processes and the software and the hardware and all of it, it's become a lot easier for me and a lot less stressful. It's just, I had to go through a lot of shit to get there, which was worth it.
Yeah. I think, I'm thinking about this a lot. And sorry, I'm squinting because now there's finally sun, but I also had my eyes dilated this morning because as my healthcare will be coming to a change, I decided to make a whole bunch of appointments.
Yeah.
So that's good to just be in that churn as well.
Is it true that you made appointments with physicians that can't treat even your body? Like you went to somebody who does prosthetics.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? Exactly.
Why not just use it up?
Just if I had to have a new foot.
Did you get your prostate checked? Did you make an appointment just because you can?
But
that's terrifying. That's the worst part of it, by the way. The anxiety that produces is such a bullshit injustice, and it prevents people from moving jobs, from exploring, from being curious, from being ambitious because they get stuck in job lock.
Let me tell you, I have had some conversations with some awesome people who have said to me, yeah, I did lose this project, but it was like, as they were saying, like the best thing that ever happened to me because I was able to do this and I was able to do that. But thank goodness my wife, husband, or I on the side have this corporate gig that gives us healthcare. It always comes back to that.
Oh, it's
always
ridiculous. And because my wife and I don't have that, I feel like a loser in society. Like if you're going to take a risk and be an artist or do something creative or something without a lot of job security, you better marry someone you better marry a teacher.
Yeah, someone who works in the government or something.
Someone who's
like
got a guaranteed health insurance plan for you and your family. And it just is. And I know I'm not a loser and I know my wife's not a loser. Like I know that we pursued our interests and we're really good at them. And so we shouldn't have to be concerned about our health insurance for that and that of our kids. And luckily, Obamacare does help folks in our situation out. Before that, we would have been, and then the fact that we live in New York State is really helpful. But that's, you're a Canadian.
But it still bothers you. It still bothers you.
Well, it bothers me because I'm industrious. I'm going to be okay. I finally, by the way, have come to that conclusion. Maybe I won't for other reasons and other circumstances, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people don't have the resources, the facilities, the education, the network that I have. And I'm no better than them. I don't deserve health insurance more than that person because I can create my own gig. Like it's not on that person that they can't create their own gig. It's not your fault. You should have health insurance no matter who you are.
It's so insane. But just that is, And so that, you want this country to produce all of this great art and great stuff, but then you just go, but how, when everyone's like, oh, but I do have to still take this gig that is going to be.
I think super wealthy entertainers should have to pay a tax to the rest of us who haven't made it or aren't making it. Like, I feel like Johnny Depp, like Robert Downey Jr. should have to pay into the Actors Fund.
Yeah, Iron Man. Why don't they just have to take on I don't know, I'm going to say 50 people's healthcare?
Oh, a lot of comedians and actors actually do that for a handful of people, and they feel better about themselves. No, I'm saying we should penalize them for their success. They don't listen. Robert Downey Jr. is not better than my friend Mitch Duncan, who went to Yale but never got a gig, like drama.
Right.
He just didn't. Right. It's a stupid business, and you're making a stupid amount of money. And I'm partly serious about this.
Yeah. No, I mean, the inequity drives me insane. And I was just thinking, because you were talking about talking to Kelly Carlin and her sort of metaphor and imagery about a vessel and everyone at the shore kind of waving for you and you're about to come in. And then
she didn't say there were a lot of people waving. It was mainly just her and a person who was lost.
A person who thought that you were someone else.
Yeah, there was another guy waiting. Is that Charlie Brown? Like, no, I'm not an animated boy, bastard. Sorry.
But I talked a few months ago after interviewing him a few times. Alan Zweibel.
Oh, he's the greatest. He's the nicest. I love him. Go ahead.
So nice, and he offered a different. Sort of a opposite metaphor, just in terms of the same boat thing, which he said, it is time to push yourself off the dock. Push yourself from the dock and go into this great, wonderful sea adventure that is clearly waiting for you.
Alan drowned a woman at sea. He threw a woman off a boat, like Robert. What's his name? I forget the name.
Who threw off? I mean, Robert.
And there's an actor, and there's always the mystery of whether or not he did it, and an actress, and Christopher Walken was apparently there, and I forget it. Everybody listening is going nuts on me right now.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. And Christopher Walken was there?
Apparently, I don't know or care. I was but that's I like what Alan said. I think that's another really good way. And it's hard though. It's hard.
It's hard.
Doesn't make it easy to jump in the deep end and other metaphors. It's scary. Well, this was great. I feel better about things talking to you. I
feel better about things. And
I also think putting them out in the universe, like we've had a lot of these talks privately, but like this one now, like recording that does something. People hear it and they will contact us one way or another, or there's an energy that.
Yeah. When someone says to me, honestly, I've gone through this, it's like already just like, it takes it down a notch. I think the worst feeling is that this is just you and you'll never get out of it because it's just you.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I do. But it's unique to you, but it doesn't mean other people haven't felt elements.
Right.
Similarities. And that's why I think I love talking to you about it, because your situation is definitely not mine. Mine is definitely not yours, but it's similar enough. That it's really worth talking about. Hey, what worked for you? And if it doesn't, dude, that's not working. By the way, before I let you go, your Instagram is hilarious.
Oh,
and you're talking about toxic positivity. And apparently you go around to stores, and when you see these like framed posters of inspiring quotes, you leave a Post-it on them, for example, and then you post it on Instagram. Here's one on your Instagram that's at Ophira E. The poster reads, "Work hard and be nice to people." And then there's a Post-it note that you wrote and put on it and left it in the store. And it says, "We need a fucking sign for this."
Yeah, that was the one that, there's plenty of signs that say relax, or, they all these sort of like, it's
here's another one.
The ones. Yeah, it's just
my life isn't perfect, but I'm thankful for everything I have. You put a Post-it on it that says, again, my life isn't perfect, but I'm thankful for everything I have. And you wrote a note, "The fuck you are."
I mean, come on. And I think that was on a napkin or something like that. It's also just like, when did, there was a moment when people stopped getting symbols and even symbols in other languages. First, it was images that people would get tattooed. And then it turned to, there was a great trend of symbols. And then it was characters in other languages. We all made jokes about people who had a couple Japanese characters tattooed on their arm. And, they were like, it says, "You're a warrior." And you're like, no, it says like, "white idiot." That's what it says. And then people, the next trend became actual words, getting actual words. And it wasn't just like names of people you love. It became like this kind of quotables, positive affirmations. And somehow it has infected our culture. And again, you know what? if I feel like it's everywhere and it's part of this same sickness where it's like you are in charge of everything. You're in charge of everything. And so just in case you think that you should be able to get help from society or the government or culture or the fellow human, just remember, it's up to you to be thankful for what you have. That's your problem. You're greedy. If I am ever in the hospital and someone across from me on the wall, it says live, love, laugh, like I'm going to murder someone. I might just kill myself.
Well, I think that there's
not how it should be.
No, I think
astrology is back. Is there any clearer sign that stuff is not okay?
Ridiculous. There's a napkin. This is the last one I'll read from Ophira's Instagram. There's a napkin, and on the napkin it says, eat well, laugh often, love much. And you left a note of it that says, binge, cry, fuck.
Really gives you a insight into my brain frame that day. Yeah, so I've exhausted all the stores in my walking distance, so I have to actually get in a car to find more stores.
So I like Eckhart Tolle quotes, and
those are actually thoughtful.
And I mentioned that, and a listener said exactly what you just said. It's sometimes no. Sometimes it's not. You just can't just be in the moment, and not worry about the things. Sometimes there's shit that's happening that there's nothing you can do about it, and it's bad. And you just have to be in it. And like, I forget what the guy wrote, but it was it was kind of liberating, because I do know none of these people or their quotes or their practices applies to every situation. It's never perfect. And I just love what you're doing here. You're not being a pessimist. You're not being negative. You're being realistic. And you're also liberating us from feeling like we have to feel those feelings. We don't. And I love that about you.
When I put them on Instagram, they got a lot of response, which was also, just obviously I was like, oh, I'm hooking into something that everyone's feeling, because everyone just commented like, yes, oh my goodness, this drives me crazy, or I don't relate. And I feel like people feel like almost harassed by these inspirational, like the banal.
Why aren't you happy? Why aren't you happy right now? Right now. Yeah.
Here's a sign.
Here's a poster.
Look at it every day.
Don't you have a calendar with an affirmation on it? Wake up. Let's go.
Manifesting used to be just called praying. Does everyone realize that? Now we say manifesting. But you know what that is? That is just sitting down and praying. Used to be to God, and now we say we're manifesting to the universe. Okay? Just like, and I grew up with I spoke about my mother passing at the top of this, and she was very pragmatic, and she always said, well, you can wish for things and you can pray. And she goes, but you think that does anything? Get up and do something.
Do something about it.
Yeah. Again, it's like, that, as I say that, I just feel exhausted.
Well, it does remind me of, I think I've said this, I went to a therapist a bunch of times, a couple therapists after I lost my job. I had always gone to therapy, but after I lost my job, I went to a new therapist, and I tried a man on, because I thought, I thought I had a man problem. I'd always talked to women, and that's all dumb too. I'm going to go back to women now. But the guy was pretty good. First guy was terrible. I don't even think he was listening. But the second guy was pretty good. It just, at the end of one session, after we talked about managing anxiety and depression and these, concerns about finances and stuff, was mostly the heart of it, really. I'm walking out, and he goes, cardiovascular is really good for anxiety. I was like, okay. And that was like a little tip that really did it. It was really a pretty good game changer for me. I'd always kind of run, but I did it more for exercise and not for for that. And I started thinking about it more, and I really started running on a very regular basis. But some things are game changers. It just made me think of that when you said, go do something. Yeah. Running.
Yeah, no, I've been doing more little cardio exercise to do these 25-minute things off my phone. And let me tell you, it's always I have to trick myself into doing it. But every single time I just start, I do come back down from it. And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, and it's just all of that, all the tricks.
Apply them all whenever possible. Nature, whenever possible. So what's that app? Do you want to suggest it? A video or something?
The workout app?
Yeah.
Is it
Oh,
good?
yeah. Oh, I do like it. It's fit with two eyes, and it's actually out of the UK. So the majority of the trainers now they have some Americans or Canadians, but most of the trainers have British accents, I love it because it's a different feel.
Yeah.
And it is not like, like, I gotta see you, Bert. It's much more like, okay, we're gonna sit on a bottom, and they're still pushing you, but somehow with the accent, I just accept it on a different level. So it really works for me. It's like the Great British Baking Show meets a workout app.
I love it. I love it. I love anything that people can use. And I think there's a lot in today's conversation, certainly for me. I'm going to work out to a British guy or lady.
I love it.
On my bottom.
I love it. Please.
All right. Well, it's just going to be upper body, though, because my ankle doesn't work. I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you
I've done
very
that
much.
ankle thing, by the way. I've done that. It will heal. It's a brutal one, and it hurts so much. The pain of that.
It's all right now. I can walk on it now, but it was just like pretty one of those things. It's where it's frustrating because now I can't do the thing that helps me cope with the other things. I know. Which is movement. I do a lot of movement when I'm down, and it works for me. And all of a sudden I can't. So I'm just doing a lot of upper body roll 'em ups.
Oh yeah. Well, that's
punches.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
All right, Ophira, thank you very much. I love talking to you as always.
Love talking to you too. Thank you. You made me feel better. Always.
All right, Ophira Eisenberg, everybody. At Ophira E on social media, OphiraEisenberg.com. That was great. And now you get to hear me complain about my ankle again. I kind of say the same shit. That's kind of embarrassing. We talked a couple days apart here, but I say something similar. Christian coming up. Christian Finnegan joining me now, one of our favorite comedians at Christ Finnegan on Twitter. Christian Finnegan, watch all his specials. He's got a new special coming out now. It's time for his special jingle. Let's do it, everybody.
Lost in brooding sentimentality, it's Finnegan Fridays. Sigh.
Preview for the new special is out. I love it. Exciting.
It is, yeah.
Congrats.
I haven't really crammed it down people's throats yet because we were waiting for the pre-order link, which is not yet live. But yeah, it is. I think it's the trailer is floating out there. You seem to find it. The special comes out on October 19th, and then the album comes out that Friday, which I believe is the 22nd.
So when can people pre-order?
Hopefully today or tomorrow we'll get that link, and then we'll start really hitting the social media and make it my pinned tweet and all that crap.
Awesome. I want to also maybe include the audio from the preview in this episode of the podcast or something, if that's okay.
Please.
Cool. Congratulations. It looks great. I'm really excited to see it. I wish I could have been at the taping. I forget why I couldn't. I think I was out of town. But either way, it looks great, and I'm excited, and everybody's going to be excited as well. Because these specials that got taped during the pandemic, I've really enjoyed them because they're just people putting together whatever you can to do stand-up, to tape a special. And it's just different, and we accept all the differences, and we even are impressed with them, and I'm impressed. I like it. Looks good.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, there have been a bunch of the quote-unquote pandemic specials that have come out. I'm hoping that mine strikes a slightly different tone than some of them. I mean, I know that there's a lot of them that kind of ignored the pandemic at all. It's just like, here's me doing stand-up on a rooftop or whatever. And then there have been others where that have kind of almost been more, it's been so hard this last year, like that have kind of leaned hard in the other direction. And mine is slightly more somewhere in the middle, where it's just kind of, it's about like, this is what we're all dealing with. And like at the very end of the special, there's some on-screen writing throughout the course of the special, some like scribbling on screen. And I sort of leave the stage to the word onward. Which is sort of the way I felt during the whole of 2020. Is just like, chin down, man. Just move forward. Play the hand you're dealt and move forward.
I like it, man. I'm impressed, and I'm proud of you, and I can't wait to see it, and I'm sure everybody else is too. Okay, I mean, the other thing, the problem is how whenever you're promoting a thing, talking about the thing is never as good as just playing the thing. It's like,
Certainly.
how much can you talk about the the show, any show that you did versus just, I remember when Bob Odenkirk, he was on Conan or something, and he started talking about a clip, and he started talking about the movie. You know what? Just play the clip, and he just played clips the entire interview. I was like, it's brilliant, smart.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was always a great guest on Conan because they had that history and all that jazz. But yeah, I mean, especially it's hard talking about comedy when it is something you can just listen to.
Yep,
and you know, whereas music, it's like it's a little bit more vague and opaque, and you can talk a little. You know, lyrics are generally they're not quite as literal, so you can kind of be a little like, here's my insight on how I wrote the song. Whereas I personally have no interest in hearing a comedian say like, here's how I wrote the joke about forks. You know, who gives a shit? I'll just listen to your joke.
So let's talk about music, because I'm like one of the best people at talking about music.
Absolutely. Top
my favorite thing from music land this week is a picture of Mick Jagger just hanging out having a beer alone at some pub in Charlotte, North Carolina. I love, like, there's a few people that are such big rock stars, especially, that when you see them doing normal, mundane shit, it does seem super entertaining, and I would watch all of it.
Yeah, it definitely. And from what I gather, he's a pretty self-effacing, friendly dude. I mean, you know, he seems to be as down-to-earth as anyone could be for someone who's been famous for, what, 50 years, 55 years. You know, it's I mean, yeah, I mean, early 60s, the Stones came out. So that's almost 60 years or whatever.
It seems like, but like certain musicians or a lot of musicians, those that use a lot of makeup, a lot of costume, or they're really flamboyant or somehow, it is weirder to see them in real life. I talked to a guy a few weeks back who has a story about sitting next to Marilyn Manson on an airplane, and Marilyn Manson had like the middle seat, and that's fascinating. But like Prince or you know, somebody, I don't know, that just David Bowie or other people that are dead, it would just be really weird to see them at the grocery store.
Well, I mean, Prince is kind of like the all-time, you know, a lot. You know, when you hear people describe someone as a lot. But I mean, apparently one-on-one, he was quite friendly and down to earth. But there's a great anecdote. There's a book called I Want My MTV by, now I can't remember the gentleman's names, Craig Marks and Rob, whatever. You can look it up. I Want My MTV. It's sort of an oral history of the first few years of MTV. And it's fantastic. But there's a great story about someone interviewing Prince. And in the interview, he's wearing two women's shoes, like one red and one yellow. And then in the middle of the interview, he says, "Excuse me 1 minute." And he leaves the room and then comes back and he's wearing the other two of those shoes. He's now wearing the left red and the right yellow. I love.
I Want My MTV, the uncensored story of the music video revolution by Rob Tannenbaum and Craig Marks.
Rob Tannenbaum, yes.
Oh, that looks interesting.
Both fine gentlemen. But yeah, I remember once when I took a really quick flight from, I think, like LA to Fresno for a college gig. And it was one of those 25 seaters where there's no first class or coach or anything like that. And Tony Bennett was on my flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was in full 3-piece suit, pocket square, tinted shades. And it's like, I appreciate that he went to the effort to look like Tony Bennett for this crappy little flight.
I saw Tony Bennett at Sirius one day. I was walking, you know, how that was out of the studio towards the lobby, and here he comes, and I did maybe an obnoxious thing, but he loved it. I just knelt down and shined his shoes. I really did that.
Good.
He laughed.
Nice.
He laughed really hard. Thank God.
Talk about a guy who's a hero. I mean, that guy, you know, he's from Astoria originally, my neighborhood of Astoria, Queens. And he founded a performing arts high school right around the corner from where I used to live. It's a specialty, like a magnet school for performing arts. And you think, oh, Tony Bennett, he'd probably call it the Tony Bennett School. No, he named it after Frank Sinatra. It's the Frank Sinatra School for the Arts. Like, who would do that? You know, just out of respect for Frank Sinatra. It's like, you're Tony Bennett. Like, you're kind of a big deal yourself.
Yeah, it's always an interesting question about ego and legacy, and if you want to leave something behind, and if so, do you want it named after you, whether you're a billionaire, you know, donating to a children's hospital wing, or in this case, Tony Bennett with a performing arts school. But
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
I agree in the sense that don't name it after anybody, but it's like I'm saying it's a piece of evidence to me of his nature, which is that he would name it after his idol and not after himself. Like, that's pretty awesome.
I'm gonna open a taco stand and name it Finnegan's.
Please. Oh my God. I love it already. Anything that gets me free tacos, I'm for.
Well, you're the only one who actually can't eat there. So I don't know. It's a weird penalty.
And Tony Bennett did wait. Tony Bennett did wait until Frank died. So maybe after I'm dead, you can open up a taco stand in my name.
All right. So speaking of, this week I had a mishap, and you're an expert at this particular one. Apparently, I rolled my ankle and forgot that like last year you had a serious ankle injury, and apparently you've had many ankle injuries. It's weird to have a lower extremity injury, because if you find solace and peace in movement and exercise the way I certainly do, just even taking walks these days, it became quite a setback for me.
Sure.
Because what do you have? What's your experience with this injury? Or
well, I mean, my advice to you would be to lead a more sedentary life, and then these things won't disappoint you as much. Just be a fat piece of shit, and this then will help roll. No, I mean, rolled ankles are definitely a fat guy's ailment. It is. I mean, and I've yo-yoed my entire adult life weight-wise, but I think once you roll your ankle a couple times, it just gets easier and easier to do it. And so I used to go out and play basketball, years ago, pretty much every night, like right before I started doing comedy in my early 20s, after I'd come home from work and I'd go play basketball for a couple hours. And I wasn't like massively overweight, but I was a bit big for a guy to be playing basketball that much. And so I would roll my ankles constantly. I probably rolled them 4 times, 2 on each side in the course of about a year. And ever since then, they've just been weak as shit. I remember the one time when I rolled it really badly, I had no health insurance, and I wasn't really a drinker at the time. This might have been the thing that set me down the path of being more of a drinker. But my roommate at the time, he was going away for the weekend, so I had nobody to help me or take care of me. And he said, "Dude, you just got to get drunk. That's what you got to do." And so he went out and got me a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I drank Jack Daniels and Diet Mountain Dew, which is now my drink of choice. For more Maker's Mark or Woodford Reserve, but bourbon and Diet Mountain Dew. Scoff if you will, Mountain Dew was created as a whiskey mixer.
Oh, that's really? Okay, well then I'll try that, I guess. I'll try anything with whiskey. I don't know how to
the Irish
make
would call whiskey the old Mountain Dew. That's what an Irish term for whiskey. I know. I mean, it sounds absurd, but it's delicious.
I feel like an injury like rolling your ankle is it's like a slip and fall injury. If you're playing sports, like you say, playing basketball, you kind of have an expectation that you might get injured. A lot of my injuries in the last couple of years, minor, have been, gardening and landscaping and building stuff, planting things, hurting my back a lot. But like this was like I slipped and fell and rolled my ankle. And it feels like there's going to be more of that. And there's a certain kind of humiliation that comes with aging slip and fall injuries. You're like, I can't believe, because you think, well, that's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to. But everybody stumbles. You stumble. You're just not paying, and everybody bangs their head into something. And I hear this a lot as men aging. A lot of injuries when you get up to pee at night. I've heard that quite a bit. So it does. It seems like there's a mental component to injuring yourself in a kind of a slip, a stumble, and you're like, I can't believe
balance
I did
issues.
That stupid thing. Yeah.
I mean, that's like my dad, as he's gotten older, his major thing is he falls very easily. Like any sort of uneven surfaces and things like that are like a real problem. Like he has a cane that he carries around just for that reason. And he's taken a face plant like 2 or 3 times, like, cut up his face and, and all sorts of stuff. And so, I do think that it is a particularly male thing. And I don't know whether it's I don't know if it's an actual mental equilibrium thing or if it's a lack of focus or something. But yeah, it does suck when your injuries just start to happen as a course of day-to-day life, and not like, oh, I did an Ironman competition and I hurt myself. It's like, no, I went to the store. And are you on crutches?
I was for like a day, but I realized that I don't think I've ever been on crutches. I've always played around with them, when somebody else is, but they were making me feel more unsafe. I wasn't good at them. I was slipping off them. I'm like, fuck this shit. Who came up with this idea? I don't know how to use these, and I'm running around with crutches, and I slipped, and I didn't know how to get up and down the stairs. I was like, forget it. And then I ended up just setting up the hammock, and I hung out on the hammock, and I felt really, really depressed. Yeah. In a way, because I had plans that day. I had plans to do this whole project outside in this one beautiful day, and I really struggled with that. But it was good. I'm good that it happened.
As a slight warning, there is a tiny little bone on the outside of your foot that can break if you roll your ankle badly. It's like a long tendon holds it in place. I can't remember what it's called, but I think I did that to myself during the pandemic last year. I was out jogging, and upstate, there's like a 4-inch dip from the end of the pavement to the side of the road, and I wasn't paying attention, and I rolled my ankle really badly, and I'm still messed up from it now over a year later. And I think it's because I probably broke that tiny little bone, but it was the height of the pandemic. I wasn't going to be going to the hospital if I didn't have to, but it's still a problem for me now, and so I wouldn't dissuade you from maybe going and talking to somebody about that, because why, especially if you're active like you are.
Yeah, not a bad idea. You're right. I probably should. And also get a physical while I'm at it, because that's been 2 years since my doctor told me I needed to take more vitamin C. Okay.
All right.
So this week, speaking of athletes and intelligence, we saw, what is it? You're a big NBA fan. So I guess the season is starting, and there's a round of press conferences and interviews, and several players, not by no means most, but several players, including some star players, have said either they're not getting vaccinated, or like LeBron James said, it's a personal decision. And it's interesting. There's a higher percentage of football players who have been vaccinated than basketball players. Don't know what that's about. Don't know why that matters, but it's easier to get COVID on a basketball court than on a football field. Nonetheless, you must have a lot of thoughts about this. I'm pretty outraged by anybody who is still saying this is a personal decision. That really triggers me to needing to sit down and calm down.
Yeah. Well, the reason that the NFL has a higher percentage, I think the NFL is at 94% and the NBA is at 90%. The reason is because the NFL as a league put in place really strong incentives. I don't know if there were mandates exactly, but I think they made it really prohibitive to not get vaccinated. Like the amount of testing and crap you have to do if you don't want to get tested is just so much of a burden that it's not worth it. Whereas in the NBA is not mandated that people get vaccinated. What people are bumping up against is that certain cities, certain arenas have mandated that that no one can be in there without being vaccinated. New York, San Francisco. So certain teams like the Warriors, the Knicks, and the Nets are going to be subject to the Knicks are entirely vaccinated. I think they're one of 2 teams in the league where every single person is vaccinated. And part of that is because they can't play in Madison Square Garden if they're not vaccinated. I wish the league would actually, lean on the players a little bit and make it kind of a blanket thing. So it really, I think a lot of these players, not all of them, but like I said, it's only 10% of the league. A lot of them probably would fold if they could fold in a way that didn't look like they were folding. Do you know what I mean? If they were forced to be vaccinated by the league, they would be able to use that as kind of the off ramp to be able to say, well, I didn't want to, but I had to as a business decision, which is a business decision they make. Like the day of interviews, what you're talking about is called media day. And at the beginning of the season, before teams go into training camp, they take pictures in their new jerseys because players have moved around on different teams, and they get interviewed and et cetera and so forth. So that's why all these interviews kind of came out the same day or two. But, that's a thing they have to participate in. That's not it's not a personal decision to participate in media day. It's not a personal decision to show up to practice. And I know they say like, oh, it's your body, blah, blah, blah. It's also, well, they tell you can't shoot up heroin before the game either. That's also your body, and it's a decision they're making on your behalf. I know it's not a complete apples to apples.
You can't even smoke. You can't even smoke pot probably in the NBA. I mean, like there's all kinds of other rules, and furthermore, outside of sports, this point has been made over and over. But the first 13 vaccines you took were fine, but this one is because
people didn't have the platform, the medium did not exist for them to feel righteous and get attention for it when they were babies and had those other vaccines, or
Stuart Stevens, who's been great, unless they were raised by wolves and never encountered the American education system. Every person who's complaining about mandatory COVID vaccine is really saying, I was fine with the first dozen or so vaccines I had to take, but the 13th is a gross violation of my rights. How do you feel about the most common two responses? It's a personal decision, which is like a lot of people like that are in leadership positions are trying to have it both ways with LeBron James. And then obviously another basketball player and a lot of other people say, I've done my own research, and both of those responses kill me.
I don't know, man. I mean, my feeling about this. To me, it's just like people see a soapbox and they can't help but get on top of it, whether that's a pro-liberal thing or a right-wing thing. Like people just can't pass up an opportunity to feel special and interesting, in my opinion. And that's, to me, what a lot of these quote-unquote vaccine-hesitant people are doing. It's just a way to feel interesting and self-righteous. And I'm the man against the sea. I'm standing against the tide of public opinion because I'm so brave. But wait, what was your question again? I don't feel like that was the question you asked.
No, just the response. No, you answered the question. Just your response to those two common responses: personal decision. I've done my own research. Sure, it's a personal decision. It's a personal decision to not let you play in the league. Or it's not. I mean, it's a personal decision that you can make, but personal decisions come with consequences. You can't just make a personal decision in a bubble and expect there to be no ripple effect from that. Your personal decision is going to lead other people to make personal decisions that may not work in your favor. And no one owes you a spot on an NBA team. There's plenty of things that you can do that disqualify you from participating in professional sports. Not just not taking a vaccine. There's plenty of behaviors that that the league or any professional sports league deems disqualifying. And so this is one of them. If you're an axe murderer, or whatever, if you've acted in ways that are, loathsome or despicable, sports teams can say, we don't want to deal with you. And so, yes, you have the right to make personal decisions, but those personal decisions have consequences. And to pretend otherwise is just, it's nonsense. I don't feel like I was very articulate there, but you get what I mean. The mandates are working, but the headlines are not.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying
with
that? You're paying attention to that kind of narrative that we're seeing. We're hearing that, in New York, who was it? It was Laura Ingraham this week who said it's a lie that the hospitals are overcrowded. The issue is that there are not enough nurses because of the mandates. And I was like, I want to look up to see if there's any accuracy to that. But here's the deal. There's only just so many beds. So it doesn't matter if there were too many nurses or not. There's only just so many ventilators. There's only just so many ICU beds.
People aren't being put in hallways because of a vaccine mandate. They aren't converting storage rooms into ICU rooms because there's a vaccine mandate. And this vaccine mandate is just taking effect now. So you're telling me that the overcrowding stories we've heard for the past 7 months are the however months since this Delta surge, the last 3-4 months, however long it's been. You're telling me that is because of vaccine mandates that hadn't yet even been announced, much less taken effect. It's an absurd shell game. It's an absurd shell game, and it's a bad faith argument, but that's all people like Laura Ingraham truck in. Is if you say A, I say B, and if all of a sudden you're saying B, well then I have to start saying A because my only desire is just to counter you.
And the other thing, just about the headlines is it's like dozens of NYPD officers are going to get laid off, or 200 United Airlines. It's the wrong headline. Yeah. The headline should be 95% of employees in this union or at this company or at this hospital have gotten vaccinated. And so 200 might sound like a big number, but there's 20,000 people there.
Yeah, it's of course, it's an absurd framing, but that gets clicks. It keeps the story sounding juicy, and it sounds, quote unquote fair. It's like, hey, well, what I'm saying is accurate, right? Are there or are there not 200 firemen or police officers in random city X who are getting fired? Yes, that's true, but the frame, I don't know if you ever, the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. It's kind of a famous media book from, I think, like the 70s or 80s. It's kind of a famous book, and I don't remember a ton of it, but one of the things that he says in it is that there is no such thing as objective news, that the news is going to be subjective simply by the direction in which the camera is facing. That if I decide to point my camera at A instead of B, that is a subjective choice. So that's what these guys are doing. It's like they're acting like it's an objective story because, yes, what they're saying is objectively true, but it's like you are definitely creating a slanted perception of the situation by focusing on these couple hundred people who are getting fired as opposed to the thousands and thousands who aren't.
Along those lines, I've always thought that the bias of whatever the most objective news source you think, they're right down the middle. No, the bias lies on the stories they decide that are in today's broadcast or in today's paper. They are not covering every story. They're certainly not covering every story with the same amount of time, which is frankly why I do, for the record, the show the way I do the show. You're always getting my bias in terms of the stories I select, but I do this news dump where I just read a whole bunch of headlines just because I just want people to know that they happened without necessarily, but again, still being selected by me. That's where the bias is. Yes. It's the stories you select, the editors select to cover is bias. You had a great... You shared, you retweeted Mark Jacob, who used to be editor of the Chicago Tribune, and it's a really great thread about how mainstream media has always tried to treat Republicans and Democrats equally. And I wonder if you wanted to say anything about that thread. I thought that was really very important and good.
I mean, it's probably the most. It's the story that kind of unlocks my understanding of so much that's gone on in the past, say, 10 years since Obama took office, is that at a certain point, Republicans, or people on the right, discovered that the mainstream media, as quote unquote liberal as they are portrayed to be, will try to find the center of any argument. And they will basically give both sides credence, no matter how absurd one side gets. And so they have discovered, like, oh, if we say the most radical shit in the world that we know is nonsense or that we know is in bad faith, it will still get half the attention. We'll still get treated as like half of the debate, as our side is being inherently reasonable, just like the other side is inherently reasonable. And that's why it's people always say, conservatives, I have liberal friends and liberals will never have conservative friends. And well, that's because you're full of shit. And so it's easier for you to be friends with us because nothing you say is true and you know it. It's like, hey, I might steal your lunch money every day, but we can still be friends, right? Well, you're the one acting in bad faith here. You're the one being the asshole. So, of course, it's easier for you to be like, hey, agree to disagree, because what I'm saying is full of shit, and deep down I know it. So we can all be friends.
Yeah, very well said. I was at a bar the other night because a restaurant at the bar, my daughter's working there as a hostess, and I went to have dinner. And she wanted me to stop over in the last hour, so I did. And I'm talking to the owner, who I know, and he brings up politics, and he's like, I'm kind of like, I look at both sides. And he's like, something, I don't agree with you on all things. And he did one of those, and I go, no, man. Now those days are over. There's only left to really discuss. There's only reality and non-reality. He's like, what do you mean? I go, there's two questions that I ask anybody if I'm getting in this conversation, which is COVID real? Are people dying of COVID? Okay. And who won the election? And if you say that Biden didn't win the election, there's not a conversation about values.
If you hedge at all.
Right. There's no values-based discussion. There's no policy-based discussion. It's either reality with all of the evidence of this happening, and some fantasy or a lie, and we could talk about other scientific things as well. But come on now, I mean, I'm not.
Well, and it's not even a question. In my opinion, I'm sure there is a segment of the people who question COVID and the election who genuinely, truly believe that it's a hoax, or that Trump actually won. Maybe there's a section, but I think the vast majority of the people who take that position, it's a tactical position. It's not a portrayal of what they actually believe. It is a tactical position to drag the debate over in that direction. And you see it happening. I mean, Brad Raffensperger, the guy from Georgia, the Secretary of State in Georgia, is kind of a perfect distillation of this to me, is that, he was portrayed as a hero for going up against Trump, and certifying the Georgia election results and whatnot. But he is now going along with these voter suppression measures, because even he is like, hey, well, there's a lot of debate about it. And so we have to have these measures. Like, OK, you are tactically using the bullshit premise of that there was election fraud to drag the electorate in the direction you want it to go. And so I really do think a lot of the people who claim like, Biden didn't actually win, they don't truly believe that. But they know that by arguing that, concessions will be made by people in the media and also by a lot of sort of middle of the road, wishy-washy Democrats of saying, well, we disagree, so let's meet in the middle. Well, now the middle has shifted further in their direction.
Right. Yeah, very well said. I wanted to get your reaction to one more thing that happened this week, which was you saw the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, testifying first in front of the Senate, the next day in front of the House. And they were talking a lot about the end of the Afghan war and the pullout and the criticism of the Biden administration. And, my tweet was, I hope Biden, just to be clear, they were trying to say, you didn't listen to the generals. The generals all advise you to stay. First of all, you can't have it both ways. When Trump was going to pull out, you're supportive. Anyway, though, my thing was, don't listen to the generals. The generals have actually been wrong for 20 years. And then 20 years before that, they were wrong. They got into and prolonged both the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, and the Afghan War because of the broken system of incentives that is generals and the military and our militarism. But the thing so number one, I'm glad he didn't listen to the generals. But number two, it was tough to see the Republicans badgering both of these men who are decorated war heroes because out of deference to anybody's job. You lost me?
You're frozen. And I've lost you. Now you just moved ever so slightly. It might be now? Me. Let me see if I turn off my Wi-Fi and turn it back on.
Can you hear me? You got me?
I think so. Yeah, I've got you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep. I'm good. I never
Okay.
lost. I never lost it.
right.
I don't know. Well, so the thing that irked me was that you could be respectful to them with your questions and criticism, but these Republican congressmen, senators, many of them were just complete assholes to these guys, completely dismissive of them. If Democrats ever were that way, that would have been a massive scandal. And I don't know if you paid attention to that, but that was my analysis of what happened this week.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a few clips, but I for whatever reason, certain news stories, it's almost like smelling salts under my nose. Like, get it away. Or like a tub of sour milk, when you smell it and you put your nose in it and you're just like, no, thank you. That's sort of the way I felt whenever I would see those clips of Milley or Austin, listening to MSNBC or whatever. I would just be like, I don't. I'll get the highlights after the fact.
Well, I'm glad then I just ranted about it because it was worth it. But
but you're certainly right in the sense that the Republicans are coasting on this reputation they had of sort of being pro-military that they've had, for so long. Yeah. But they just chip away at it constantly, and it doesn't seem to be hurting them yet. You think, it takes time. Maybe over the next 5 years, you'll see sort of the military less aligned with the Republican Party. But it's hard, though, because a conservative mindset is a very militaristic mindset to begin with. And generally speaking, a liberal mindset is not. And so there's a reason why the military is associated with the right, because the right they have more of a soldier's mentality. To make a broad stereotype, liberals have more of an artist mentality. Those
are fair. But
orientation.
And yet conservatives don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
But in the military,
they love the military if the military is hurting other people on their behalf. But,
I agree with that. Final thing I want to ask you is, and I don't know if you saw this, I probably should ask you, but we lost another comedian this week. Russell Brand went down the rabbit hole of basically saying the conservative conspiracy line about the 2016 election. And it was Hillary Clinton who worked with the Russians to cheat to win the election, not Donald Trump. Did you see this?
I saw it, and I immediately, because I cannot fathom a moment in my life where I've ever given two shits what Russell Brand has to say on anything. He's one of those guys who just talks a lot, and so it sounds smart. And because he's British, he'll use things like perhaps and, quite. He'll use these words that sound fancy to an American ear. But when you really break it down, it's just a bunch of self-help bullshit. It's just a bunch of bullshit. And so I really have zero interest in what he has to say on any topic. But it doesn't surprise me at all. It really doesn't. Especially, again, it's not a coincidence that this always seems to happen when dudes enter middle age. When they stop feeling part of the sort of cultural zeitgeist, they first of all, they start to resent the fact that they're not part of the cultural zeitgeist anymore, which makes them more conservative in their thinking, because it's very if you're used to kind of being thought of as cool, and all of a sudden the young people who are determining what's cool don't find you cool anymore, it curdles you slightly. It makes you sour. And I think that is a driving force to what makes a lot of comedians or rock stars become conservative as they get older, is the sort of rejection by the arbiters of cool. And also, this is the Glenn Greenwald, like this is this sort of horseshoe theory, which some people dismiss, but I find it to be pretty accurate in a lot of cases, that if you follow the wormhole far enough, you will end up making conservative arguments for them, just because that's the only way you can feel edgy as a 51-year-old former heroin addict cool dude. That's the only edge you can acquire at this point in your life, is to sort of become anti-woke or anti-liberal or whatever.
I am glad I asked now. And are we waiting in the Ellen Pompeo Denzel Washington controversy? Or are we just...
I think that from what I gather, from what I read, my extensive research on this topic, it sounds like she's just talking shit on her podcast. And, you know, Denzel Washington has been kind of, I don't know if there's a word for being sanctified in the 21st century, almost memeified. Like, he stopped being a human being. Like, you have to, in order to be sort of part of the cultural mainstream, you have to basically just faint and start masturbating the minute anyone brings up Denzel Washington. You know, and he's a great actor. He's fucking great. I mean, he's a superb actor and all that. But it's just, there's a few people in the culture that it's like, you just can't say anything bad about ever now. Yeah. And it's almost because there's just been some weird collective agreement that this person is not to be touched in any negative way, shape, or form. For me, from what I read, I haven't listened to her podcast. It just sounded like a dumb actor spouting off about the time she told off a famous person. You know?
Yeah. Well, it sounded like me. A lot of people were saying that it was race-based. And I was like, listen, first of all, I don't care about this. It's none of my business. I'd love to hear anybody else's point of view that was there. People should spout off about stories like that. But to me, she just sounded like kind of an asshole. Yeah. Like any one of us. It was all ego. Maybe it was gender. I don't know, but it was really more than gender or race. It seemed like ego. This is my house. Yeah. I've been here forever. You're new here, and you're going to come in here and tell me what to do in my house. That's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon, especially not on TV shows. It's not like It's not like the movies where the director is king. The director on a television set has far less influence and importance than on a movie set.
It reminds me of the day that you joined the cast of Are We There Yet and dressed down Ice Cube.
Constantly. I would call him a melted Ice Cube. No, I wouldn't.
A tyrant of ice.
Well, we had a number of famous, I think I probably mentioned this on the podcast, but Alfonso Ribeiro directed about 30 episodes of Are We There Yet?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Ted Lange, who played Isaac on The Love Boat, directed a few episodes. A few random sort of, I think, because a lot of times former actors or actors who have kind of are looking to enter the next phase of their lives, they don't really want to be actors anymore. They will get work directing sitcoms as kind of like a boot camp. And so a lot of actors would come through and direct episodes of Are We There Yet? And, you know, of course you respect them. Of course you listen to them, but you listen to the executive producers and the showrunners more. A director on a TV show is kind of a replaceable part.
Well, that's what happened with Fred Savage's career.
Yeah, he's a big director now.
Don't know if you followed that, but I certainly have.
He directed a number of episodes of Party Down, which is one of my favorite shows of all time.
Oh, is that right? Huh.
Have you ever watched Party Down?
Nope, never even heard of it, I don't think.
I recommend it unreservedly.
All right.
It is,
where did I find it?
Well, it originally aired on Starz, but I know it's streaming. It's streaming somewhere. And it's basically a comedy show about a cast, a group at a catering company in LA. And every episode they're catering a different party. And so sometimes they'll have like guest stars and things like that. But it's super great. Adam Scott is the lead in it. Lizzie Kaplan, who was in like Masters of Sex, and
looks good.
Other shows. Ken Marino. If you were a fan of The State at all, which was that sketch group from the 90s. If you enjoy like 30 Rock or Kimmy Schmidt or Parks and Recreation or The Office, anything like that, I would wholeheartedly recommend Party Down.
Thank you very much for that recommendation. I was going to ask, we got one. And thank you, as always, for joining me. A lot of interesting takes and thoughts on a broad range. We almost always do like a little personal stuff, a little mundane, a little topical. And that's why people love these chats at the end of the week. Thank you very much, sir.
I do want to apologize that I don't have my fancy mic today, so I feel like I've been shouting this whole time. So I apologize for the bad audio and loud shouting sound.
It's fine. No one will even notice. Thank you very much, sir.
Bye.
Did you notice the mics were not the highest quality, either of our mics, but that is going to change back next week. I got the equipment, and I'm sorry for complaining about that and for complaining about all the things I was complaining about. I didn't mean to be negative and complaining and miserable, but I appreciate you being there for me, and I'm there for you. So I hope, at least. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And thanks so much for listening to the show this week. I love you guys. I heard from a lot of people who had a lot of different challenges this week, from illness to loss to all kinds of other issues. And so I know there's a lot of folks out there struggling, and I'm happy to be along the ride with you and to continue to support each other. That's what we do here at Stand Up. So join us in our community. Go to standupwithpete.com right now. Sign up if you haven't already. Another great week of shows. I really appreciate your support. John Carroll, I think I may see him Monday. He's coming through, and I think I'm going to hook up with him. So I'm very excited to do that. Looking forward to do that. Also headed up to Saratoga this weekend for one night, Saturday night, to get together with a few of my high school buddies. That should be great. And so I am excited to come back very recharged next week. Love you guys. I'll talk to you then. John Carroll, take us away.
Well, all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on.